Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this event entitled Nature-Based Solutions as Climate Action, organized by WWF Malaysia in partnership with MCCG as part of the Climate Action Forum series of events for iGEM 2020. I am Lavanya Rama Iyer, Head of Policy and Climate Change in WWF Malaysia, and I'll be your moderator for this session. WWF Malaysia would like to record our thanks to the organizers of iGEM, MGTC, and CASA for providing us with this opportunity. Being the first virtual event of the scale for most of us, indeed it was a steep learning curve, and we would also like to thank all those behind the scenes providing excellent technical support to make this event a reality. Nature-Based Solutions event has been split into two parts, and today we will be listening to the perspective from the corporate sector. You can also follow the second part tomorrow in the afternoon. As you may be aware, the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report 2020 ranks climate change and nature loss in the top 5 risks faced by the global economy in the next 10 years in terms of both likelihood and impact. This follows in the heels of devastating wildfires and flooding events around the world just before the world plunged into the throes of the global pandemic, potentially triggered by nature loss too. So it is apparent that we need responses that can deliver multiple solutions to address all these and other societal challenges together. It is therefore timely that we are able to hear from progressive enterprises that have already undertaken various initiatives embedding nature into the core of their business operations. We have an exciting session with the opening presentation by someone who many consider contributed significantly in forging the Paris Agreement, Manuel Pulgar Vidal, President of UNFCCC COP20 in Lima, Peru, and currently WWF International's Climate and Energy Practice Leader. Next, we will hear from the founder of the greenest hotel in ASEAN, the Frangipani Resort in Langkawi, Adjunct Professor Anthony Wong Kim Hui, who will explain some of his innovative methods. Following that, the young but very experienced and passionate Ms. Firdaus Nisha Muhammad Faisal, a social entrepreneur whose enterprise Ecocentric Transitions has recently developed a card game called Rimba to create awareness about Malaysian biodiversity. Today, we will hear about their exciting journey in nurturing the young's appreciation of what the land can provide. Next, we have Mr. Hitesh Kataria joining us from India. He manages climate change advocacy for the Mahindra Group and will share Mahindra's rationale and approach in working with nature as part of their business model. Thereafter, we will hear from Mr. Ram Nathan, this time joining us from Sabah. He is a senior manager at Sabah Softwoods Berhad, and today he will tell us about their innovative way to manage human-wildlife conflict, which fosters coexistence with elephants, whilst also having a positive impact on the company's bottom line. Last but not least, we will hear from Mr. Lee Hock Lok from ERE Consulting Group Sendirian Berhad. He will share with us his vast experience in designing infrastructure projects that are sensitive to nature's needs. I'm really thrilled with this lineup and hope you find the session exciting and informative. Before starting, just a few housekeeping rules. We will be running all the presentations consecutively before having a Q&A session at the end. Please feel free to post your questions identifying the speakers you would like to have them addressed into the chat function. We will try and respond to as many as possible of the questions you pose during the Q&A session later. However, as some speakers may not be with us due to time differences, we will forward your questions to the speaker and revert by email at a later date for some of these questions. Now, without further ado, let's start.
Hello, friends. How are you? I am more than delighted to be part of this AGEM 2020 to talk about some important topic, nature-based solutions. And nature-based solutions as an important tool for climate action and what corporate can do in relation to nature-based solutions and how much by working through that topic, they could contribute with our climate objective. So I will give to you 15 minutes, a bit less talk about not only the importance of nature-based solutions, but also how much nature-based solution it is becoming an important way to address our climate objective. So I will divide out my talk in 5 main elements. So let me start to talking about the concept. And probably you are wondering why I am going to the most simple, to the base of the concept and the definition of nature-based solution. And it is because we do need to understand that not every intervention on nature means nature-based solutions. That is very important to recognize, because nature-based solutions means an intervention on nature to address a societal challenge that can create benefits to the biodiversity, to the people, and to the economy. So when we think about nature-based solutions, we should consider those 3 values. The first one, it is a sustainable intervention on nature. And there are some criteria of what kind of sustainable criteria it should be adopted for that intervention. But the second element, it is strongly important. It is to address a societal challenge. So the idea is that by this intervention, we are going to help to address something that it is a challenge for the society, for your country, or for your sector. It could be fresh water, so water scarcity or water security. It could be food security. It could be risk management, so to promote risk reduction, or it could be climate, among some other topics. So what it is important, it is to recognize that we should identify clearly what is that societal challenge and how are we planning to address and how much we are contributing through our action to address it. And also by having ways to measure our progress and our success. So you can develop your nation-based solutions action against your climate plan or against some other important document that report the importance of that specific challenge. So that is the second element. And the third one, it is about benefits. So you should be able to count the benefits. What are those benefits to the nation, to the people, and to the economy? And again, probably you are wondering why I am going to that so basic definition. Because nature-based solutions, it's getting a strong political traction. It has been recognized by COP25 for the Standing Committee on Finance, and it has been identified as a top priority for COP26. So probably in COP26, by later 2021, we will have a more clear recognition of nature-based solutions. It is happening even in the biodiversity debate, and it could be probably and potentially recognized by the COP15 in Kunming, China, by May of 2021. So that political traction brings consequences. So what does it mean? It is that if it is going to be recognized politically as part of formal processes, probably that demand of being more clear and of being more specific in defining nature-based solution, it is going to be the consequence. What it is true, because if countries are going to measure how much by nature-based solution they are addressing a societal challenge, it should be under clear criteria and under clear consideration. So that is why the importance of coming back into the concept. But when we think about concept, also we do need to recognize that recently the World Conservation Union, IUCN, has released what it is called a gold standard for nature-based solution. Those standards are those criteria to what I have just referred to. And the idea is to follow those criteria, to follow those standards as a way to be clear that you are adopting a strong nature-based solutions action or initiative. And finally, in relation to the concept, remind that nature-based solution, it is to integrate, to break out silos. So the idea is that your action must be focused in integrate land, forest, food, resilience, and even traditional knowledge and conservation, and supply chains. Because the point it is that by working in nature-based solution, we are going to avoid what we used to have in the past, in which we isolated each one of those topics without success. So the integration, it is a key element when we think about nature-based solution. That is why also I am so delighted to be here, because I know that after this, you are going to talk of urban nature-based solutions, tourism nature-based solutions, among some others. So remember to integrate and to break out silos, because we are in a time of convergence. We are in a time in which we are trying to build a nexus in between climate, nature, health, the economy, and the political decision. That is the lesson that the pandemic has brought to us, to integrate and to promote convergence. So that it is about the concept, my first idea for today's IGM 2020 session. Let me now move into my second main idea. What is our climate objective? Because we should have clarity on what are we expecting when we think about climate. We are expecting two main things. The first one, it is real reductions towards a net zero world and to align the temperature into no more than 1.5. That is clear. Everybody is conceding that that is what we should do. And fortunately, the science has reinforced that objective. And the second objective, it is about resilience. And when we think about resilience, the point it is through adaptation, how can we move the planet into be resilient to the consequences of climate change? If these two elements are the main objective based in what we have agreed through the Paris Agreement, the point it is, what is the role that nature-based solutions can play in those objectives? And that moves me to this idea. Real reduction, strong reductions, and ambition, it is your main responsibility. The point it is that we should avoid to have nature-based solutions as a way to backslide your climate responsibility or as a way to greenwash your lack of responsibility. And sorry to be a bit tough with this, but it is important to have this into consideration. The point it is that you have to adopt a climate mitigation hierarchy in which real reductions must be the top priority. And for some other residual emissions, you could use nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions will play a role to reduce, to mitigate, but your first priority and your top priority, it is real reductions in your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So in your energy consumption, but also in your supply chain. So that is why it is so important to bring the idea of the climate objective. But in relation to this topic also, it is important to recognize that we are moving to a complementary objective related to nature, the concept of nature positive. As we know, the world is discussing what it would be the next step in relation to the CBD, to the Biodiversity Convention, in which we have already thought about targets, 30% of well-protected areas, for example, but also now we are thinking about this concept of nature positive. And again, what does it mean to be nature positive? It is to use the mitigation hierarchy. It is to manage in a sustainable way the nature. It is to reduce your emissions in sense of climate and to well manage the nature in relation to your scope 1 or 2 if it is included in your economic activity. So never forget the climate and the nature objective, because that is the top priority for the world. The third element, it is about different things that are influencing the political process. So I've already referred to COP26. We expect to have good decisions about nature-based solutions in COP26 for climate and also in the COP15 for biodiversity. So we are expecting to have a strong 2021 year. But also we are expecting to strengthen what it is called the non-state actors agenda. So to have the non-state actors agenda, scaling it up into a next phase. And in this next phase, what we are expecting it is to have more corporations joining the Science-Based Target Initiative. The best way to show your responsibility, it is by subjecting your targets into a science validation. And SBTi, it is a good way to do that. And now also, you could do it for nature through what it is called the science-based target for nature. So that is an important thing to be developed by the non-state actors, mostly the business sector, to transmit their credibility and their own responsibility. And also what we are expecting it is to have more clarity around what it is called the climate claims. Because until now, what we are listening, it is corporations talking about net zero, carbon neutrality, carbon positive, climate positive, and that is creating a bit of confusion. Fortunately, SBTI is working in a clear concept of what does it mean net zero, and what are the actions that you must develop to be a net zero corporation, to have an economic activity that it is focused to achieve the net zero. So follow that rules. That is the best way to have your claim being credible and being followed by your partners. So we are going to flatten it, the floor, to have everybody based in the same kind of rules. So that is my third element. My fourth element, it is about the recovery. We are in a time in which we are planning how are we thinking to live this pandemic time. What is going to be the new normal? Some organizations and leaders are talking about the reset of the planet. So what does it mean? And what is the role that nature-based solutions could play in relation to the recovery? Remember that there are some principles to be adopted as part of those recovery packages. We do need to promote action that can show real reductions, that can promote green and decent jobs, that can promote equitable access, that could mean a low cost, that fits perfectly with our net zero objective, that can promote a healthy environment, that can reduce temperature, and also that can show to promote economic benefits and competitiveness. So those are the criteria to have clear nature-based solutions action in relation to the post-pandemic time of recovery. And finally, let me say that to have a strong nature-based solution, you must follow science. And science has already told us that we should work for transitions: the energy transition, the land use, the urban transition, the industry transition, among some others, as for example, transport. So if we can fit our nature-based solution with those transitions, we are going to be more effective in our consequences and in our benefits, the benefit that we can create to the world. So it is good that we are working around an evolving concept. This evolving concept is going to contribute with an important percentage of what it is called the climate solution. But we do need to be clear and strong in our action. We do need to be credible, transparent, by tracking progress and by reporting. It is the only way to really make nature-based solutions that strong tool that we are expecting must be. So let me congratulate to you all that are working in nature-based solutions, that have shown your will to move nature-based solutions as part of your climate responsibility. But don't forget the element that I have just shared with you, because are going to be an important part of the process and are going to raise your credibility, your reputation as a good corporation or good company, that it is strongly connected with the climate objective of the world to avoid and to overpass the current situation of climate emergency. So again, thank you very much. I hope you successful discussion. I hope you productive discussion, because we are all together working to the same. A sustainable planet that can give to the next generations a better planet. So thank you very much. And again, delighted to be part of IEM 2020. Thank you and bye-bye.
Good evening. I will be speaking on constructed wetland for wastewater treatment using ecological design engineering for sustainability and cost saving. My name is Anthony Wong. I've been researching and building up the knowledge on this area since 1991, almost 30 years ago, or 29 years. when we started our resort in Gombak called the Jungle Lodge. At the moment, I'm at our resort in Langkawi, Frangipani Resort, but we also have an organic farm here. My background is in tourism or ecotourism when I started off in the 70s, always being very passionate and a pioneer in the field. And because of my sustainable background, I ventured into hospitality in the late 80s. The opportunity to push the agenda further came in 2005 when we purchased this hotel in Langkawi, where we have got an acre of farm behind. And also, we developed further the constructed wetland as our wastewater system at the resort was not working so efficiently. So I applied what I learned and then invited other academia and industry like architects and engineers to see what could be done using ecological design. I've been teaching and speaking for the last 25 years in the Asia Pacific region in my field. Being a practitioner, I've been appointed as a adjunct professor at UUM Taylor's University and UKM Lestari. We talk about bioremediation for the 21st century. Of course, it comes with big data and artificial intelligence. So I'm using nature, which is bioremediation, in my work. And this process is using what nature has given us over 2 billion years of research that they have done, using all sort of natural system to help us sort of get better, or I say remediation. Now, why the introduction of wetland? Is you can see a paddy field is a wetland, a mangrove is a wetland, and it has its own unique characteristic. And you find wetland all over the world. Why is so important? Because it can be inexpensive and very flexible and applied to so many different environments: domestic sewage treatment, agriculture, washing, wastewater, fuel runoff, industrial effluent, pharmaceutical waste, housing, and municipal sewage and sludge disposal, landfill runoff, and its low maintenance, urban and stormwater runoff, and also buffering and water filtration. In mining and metal reclamation, you need to improve the discharge, stream, river, and lake restoration, flood control and habitat enhancement, and treating landfill leachate, and all at a fraction of the cost compared to the normal treatment of wastewater.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Wong. I'm the Managing Director of Frangipani Resort and Spa in Langkawi. When we purchased this property 15 years ago, the septic tank were not working, this part. Yeah, you can come over and see the septic tank. So this is full, and we will pump it up with a pipe above. We pump it up to the front of the river. There used to be a river called Sungai Anak Tasik, and we will bring it up to the front of the river, and we have made a number of plants that we planted on. Now, because when we purchased in 2005, there was someone who built a house over the river that discharged into the lake, so it became a dead pond. But because I started constructed well in 1991 in Gombak, where I built two large ponds to treat the wastewater from the small hotel, which has got about 160 people. So here, because of this, I created a constructed wetland here. So please follow me. I go around with my pruning knife so that wherever I see that needs to be pruned, I prune. Yeah, just follow the white pipe that's down here. This is the old staff quarters, so which was built in 91, we took over in 2005. Just follow the pipe, the white pipe. It has taken us at least a year to master the combination of plants. And you can see here, bulrush and the one with the flower right atop, cat's tail. And here, with the yellow flower, these are what you call water mimosa. They are edible, not like the land mimosa which has thorns. This do not have thorns. Again, you have see the cattail. So this is sort of part of the wastewater treatment system. So the pump, the wastewater will come out to the last pipe here. This white pipe is the bath water from our staff quarters. Just below here we have all our kitchen water coming out and laundry water. So it all goes to the beginning of the river. This is the beginning of the river. Yeah. But because we are now in a lockdown, you don't see much movement. But it goes through this system. Yeah. The first plant is water mimosa, and you normally have a lot of oil slick that will become a ball. But because we have got a microbe called A. bucanasis, which will eat up the oil, you have to cultivate it. After a while, you find it there. Yeah. Okay. We will go along here. This is they close the resort. We have to do a lot of pruning. This is where we have our black soldier fly. We collect waste food and we breed maggots that is used to feed our chicken, duck and fish. Our organic farm here, we got Brazilian spinach, we got the bayam, red bayam, which we are letting it go to get the seed. Yeah? Bananas and papaya. The papaya here is not so good now, it's about 2 years. We made a mistake because I buried it under a pile of construction material rocks. So the roots cannot go down deep and it tends to be blown over by the wind. But the next one on your left, we have it more where there's no rocks below. Then the plants will be strong. Yeah? I'm using natural farming, the latest, the best Korean jadam system. At the back, you can see a number of what you call stingless bee or kelulu. We breed them as a side income for the hotel. We have 14 nests, and in the dry season, we can collect about 3 kilos every 3 weeks of stingless bee. Yeah, and we grow a lot of flowers here to feed the bees. Yeah? And then you can see the water hyacinth. You can see all along the bulk of the plant we use is water hyacinth, but it's a combination to make sure that the water in all parameter is clean. Each place, the fan, the seawater current will bring salt water in. So this was part of the the sea actually. We could not grow anything, but you know, we are doing composting. We rear chicken to actually enrich the soil for planting. These are shore plants called pandanus. They are normally grown in mangrove or beside the sea. So you can see the historical evidence, the sea water came into this place. Yeah, the sand was salty, and you can still see the sand is white from the beach. Yeah, it takes a long time to make it rich. Management of the water. Now the water is crystal clear. Yeah, you can even almost drink it because it is class 1 almost river standard. We'll see the technical side from here. The first university I must acknowledge to recognize this was UC Technology Malaysia, UTM in Johor. Yeah, in 2009. But we have also worked closely with UKM Lestari, which very much support us on what we're doing in constructed wetland, especially Datuk Professor Mazlin giving all the support. Now, you can look at this. Every 6 months during the peak season, we actually record. We send to a lab in Penang, and this is the record. Yeah, and the latest record is in February 2020. So you can see from here, everything is not detectable. It's actually 1111. There are 32 parameters in comparison to the normal wastewater. So this is drinking standard water to measure. Yeah, and this is the basis of our constructed wetland. We are dealing with plants, fish, snails, microbes like algae, bacteria, virus, protozoa. Yeah, it's combination and a balance. So nature has taken 2 billion years to master itself. We are only using what it does. So it's many different microbes. It takes you generally 6 months to balance out the whole what you call water balancing, to make sure you get class 1 river standard. Yeah, mixture of different plants. So here we have almost 8 to 12 different species of plants that you don't see, duckweed, yeah, which are very tiny, that is brought in by wild ducks. Yeah, these normally eaten by fish. So these are the things that we do, and the water could be drinkable. All you need is to filter UV, and it's drinkable. But of course, we don't drink it. We just use it for water in our garden. Thank you.
Hi, it's really cool to be with you guys today and talk about how the work we do as a social enterprise with education is a big part in terms of mainstreaming nature-based solutions. So today I'm going to share with you our children's program, which we've been running for like probably the longest running program that we have, which is a children's gardening program called Gang Jari Hijau. The way it's conducted, it is a project-based program that runs for about 8 months. It brings young people out of the traditional classroom into the outdoor classroom, which we call the garden classroom. And we apply a lot of interconnected learning so that we're not just talking about science or nature-based solutions by itself. We are also looking at it from a people's point of view. So as a young person, when you consume something, what happens to what the parts that you don't consume, so the throwaway stuff. So in that sense, the nature-based approach for us has always been about resource management and appreciating the larger landscape of where our food comes from. So food security is a big part of global consumption and local production. So let's get to the next slide. Right. So this is what it looks like within the midterm, meaning that the midterm could be a 40-day crop cycle where kids are already producing the food and they are seeing the changes in the soil. So if you look at this area here where my mouse is, the soil is pretty dry. It's very clayey, it's very hard. And when the kids step on it, they realize that it doesn't sink. But as soon as they step into the garden bed, they realize it's very soft. It's got more earthworms. It's got possibly ants in certain times of the year, and they can see the difference as soon as they start to condition the soil for gardening. So immediately, although our classroom does address this learning, children are seeing the difference in the retention of topsoil, in the effects of how the network, the soil food network is functioning. And this is a very big part of nature-based solutions that maybe it sounds really small, but it has a very broad impact. So when kids are producing vegetables, they are always challenged to eat the vegetables that they produce. So indirectly, we've got kids eating more stuff, and at the same time, they are realizing that different things taste different. And we're talking about nutrition cycling. And so as they go through this process, they see that different seasons affect their vegetations very differently. So this is how we talk about flood resilience. So in the case of this particular set of images, you can see on the top here, because these are climbers, they have struts to hold them up and they don't fall down. But way at the bottom, although it doesn't look natural, we've used cement to mitigate flooding. And when we work on these projects, we are, as facilitators, we're torn in two different minds, because the Terengganu, Kelantan folks that we work with, they face monsoon and everything gets washed out. And so for them, they start selecting better soil mix, which is has higher sand content. They also plant more sellable crops like pandan. They look at gotukula. They plant more mint. They have a lot more, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is selom. And so, these are things that people eat as ulam. These are things that are highly economical. So this affects young people in terms of understanding that from just a little bit of labor in the garden, they are earning an income. They are learning the economics of things. They are scaling up in terms of interaction with the adults and with the community that they live in. And so this flood resilience actually gives them a constant yield over time. And for this particular one, it is on the other side. So that was Kelantan Terengganu. This side is the Kedah Perlis side, where it is very dry on certain times of the year. And so what happens in this extreme, we end up mulching the garden beds with dry grass, which is, my mouse is missing. Yeah, so with dry grass. And on the other hand, we have these thick, shade covers that actually roll down the sides partially to keep the moisture and trap humidity. So these are evaporation control mechanisms, and the kids actually see it, because when they didn't do it in the first part of our workshop, and they were very defeated with, like, plant die out, obviously dehydration, people not being able to identify at which point the plant died. But once they start mulching, once they start having these shades, they realize that their plants survive much better, and it comes to the point where they can crop and sell. And so then they start implementing all these simple traditional type of agricultural literacies, and these kind of looks at how do you adapt to climate differences or weather changes, and over time how we can be a bit more productive in what we are growing. They also go into a process of selecting the right kind of plants that would be more resilient to change and have longer life cycles, and also drop seeds that have the continuous reproduction of the plant. So in this case, we have roselle. bunga telang, and the murungai plant. And these three plants produce a bountiful of opportunities because like Roselle, they make drinks, they eat it or they sugarize it, it becomes a jam. Bunga telang becomes the colorant for food. They make drinks out of it. They've made ice cream out of this. And murungai is a super plant. You can eat the leaves, you can eat the flowers, you can eat the seed pods. It's very easily grown. You just have to pluck a branch and stick it in the ground. So these kind of plants are like staple plants in most of the gardens that we work in. So the young people actually see that you can balance labor if you understand nature, if you understand the profile of each of the plants that you're growing. Even selecting which part of the garden is, I guess, drier and wetter, or has more shade or has less shade. So all this comes into play when you see them set up these kind of beds where they're intercropping and they're rotating their plants. So if you look at what this teacher is trying to unplug here, I think this is also kailan, and it's starting to flower. So they have these systems where they have rotation, but at the same time, they also learn that certain things grow well, you know, combination planting, and which ones require a lot of flowers around them because they attract bees to do pollination. So coming back to like nature-based solutions, I think the children, although they don't understand it at a scientific level sometimes, especially the non-academic kids who are in our program, they really enjoy the time and the observations that they make. And I think this is very pivotal in terms of behavioral change, because if people understand that they have the power to produce food and they can produce food very affordably, then what you do is you increase food availability and you reduce carbon footprint of food transportation and food miles. So I think this is a very big opportunity that we're looking at, and that's why when we do these programs, we're usually in the, out of urban area kind of locations. And having resilient food is one thing, selection, ensuring that these crops and produce actually sustain the nutrition that we need to survive, right? And to have good and balanced nutrition. We look at nutrient recycling and the use of microbes. So in these two photographs, you have the kids doing composting. So they collect like vegetable scraps or grass clippings, and they collect dry leaves from around the compound, and they learn how to make compost. In the other photograph, we actually go out to the local market and they collect fish. And so I think you can barely see the carcass of a fish there. And they make fish emulsion. And these two things are really about reducing all this organic matter from entering the landfill or just decomposing without, participating in the production of food. So in this case, we're trying to reduce leachate. We're trying to reduce release of methane and carbon into the atmosphere from just organic waste rotting away. So we're looking at these opportunistic spaces, because when the students start running the production of these type of fertilizers on their own, they are leveraging on their school canteen. They have access to bring in, materials from home. So we've had kids who bring in like, prawn skins, and their mom had frozen it in the freezer as a chunk, and then they dig under the lime tree and they bury the whole chunk of frozen prawn skins. And then within like the month, they start saying like, oh, my limau tree has got flowers and stuff. So kids are seeing this in real life, and they understand that, oh, so that prawns that I put in the ground under the limau tree actually fed the limau tree. Now the limau tree has all these nutrients to bear fruit and flower, and continue to have a productive cycle. So these kind of things become very real as kids go into this process. And we also do a whole bunch of other things. Like, for instance, they make this thing called fermented plant juice, which is a fertilizer. They make liquid insect repellent. So it's like you're collecting different kind of bitter leaves and you are fermenting it over time, and you spray this onto your plants. So it becomes natural insect repellent that does not have a blanket effect on all insect life. So it just kind of stops the aphids, it kind of stops the mealybugs, and it kind of lets the bigger insects become predators. So you see like what do you call it, praying mantis, you see dragonflies in the garden, you see ants, that's quite normal. And I mean, they still have to handpick all the snails, but it becomes a really cool activity for them. So they understand that this whole interaction with nature is not a one way. I colonize space, but I am interacting with nature. So early on in the program, they actually they have a square 1 foot by 1 foot frame, which they will lay on the site that they start to grow their garden. And they realize that when they do an audit, there's very little life when they even dig the soil. And once our program starts and things start to grow, they realize that the biodiversity in the same 1 foot by 1 foot square changes dynamically. And in this set, I also have the black soldier fly, BSF, because in some places, they occur naturally. And when the kids left certain things to ferment too long, like the fermented fruit juice or the liquid insect repellent, or, the fermented fruit juice or the fish emulsion, and they don't close it properly, they realize that either maggots occur or BSF start to consume it, and then they go like, oh my god, this is insane, something went wrong, then they realize that there's this balance they have to play. So instead of saying that it's a failed experiment, we encourage them to culture the BSF, and they actually feed chickens with this. So this whole interconnectedness of learning becomes very project-based, and by the time they end with us in the 8th month, we realized that the kids are already bringing seeds home, because things like bitter gourd would have come to maturity, and they would have missed a couple of fruit pods, and then they get seeds to then replant the next generation. And yeah, so they bring seeds home and they grow their seeds, and they bring home some of these things that they've learned from the program. And it's really, really interesting, because they then become very conscious about the weather changes, and they're very conscious about like picking what kind of vegetation that their mom wants to cook and what they want to eat. So it's really interesting to hear them talk about their awareness on all these things. And definitely seeing these kind of workshops go through with kids also influence their parents. So we are actually seeing in some cases the parents of the children that we teach, because we do meet them on and off throughout the program, they have started looking at unique, almost heirloom type varieties that are available in their kampong. So we get to see this whole revitalization of older varieties that we've not seen before, because we see very urban type vegetable when we go to the supermarket. And then we see another layer or an extension of a selection when we go to the seed shop. And when you go into a village or a community that is on the outskirts of the cities, they have so many varieties that we barely eat in the city. So seeing those kind of influencers start to participate in the program is really interesting. And we realized that with all this, we actually live with a certain level of behavior change amongst the kids and their families and their teachers. So that's pretty cool. And we realized that at the end of this process, they would have entered the sharing economy, where they share seeds, or a teacher would buy up all the chilies and they'll turn it into sambal, and then they'll make nasi lemak, and everybody will come and eat nasi lemak. So, these type of values that expand beyond nature-based solutions are very, very exciting to see, because as we talk about sustainability and food security, it's really built on top of communities that are interacting, that's interconnected and resilient. So this is what resilient means in terms of food security. And so as a social enterprise, our mission is environmental intelligence, to find how little things that we can push that creates big impact. And so, yeah, as a social enterprise, I would say we are unique in terms of looking for that sweet spot, and we custom build the experience for the participants. So when I'm in Kelantan, I have to talk like a Kelantanese. When I'm in Kedah, I have to talk like a Kedah person. So I try very hard, and my Bahasa Malaysia can pass lah. So that's also part of being adopted into the community, and the speed of trust is really important. So yeah, I think that's the uniqueness of being a social enterprise, the ability to be agile that way. All right, so that's my presentation about how we end up doing school edible gardens and community gardens. And I would really, really like to thank WWF for having me, and I wish all the best to iGEM and all the activities that you guys are gonna have over the couple of days. And for me, thank you very much, and see you guys again.
Hello everyone, this is Hitesh Kataria. I'm part of the $20 billion Mahindra Group. Mahindra Group is the federation of companies that enables people to rise through innovative mobility solutions, driving rural prosperity, enhancing urban living, and nurturing new businesses and fostering communities. It's headquartered in India and employs over 256,000 people across 100 countries. And I've been working with the Mahindra Group for the last 8 years. I sincerely thank and appreciate the efforts put behind by WWF and the International Green Tech and Eco Products Exhibition and Conference Malaysia 2020. And thank you for the invitation. Today, I have been asked to share my views on the topic nature-based solutions. And what is the corporation perspective on nature-based solutions? So as we know, climate change is real. The kind of impacts we have brought upon the planet are available for all of us. The human lifestyle has brought carbon footprint upon this planet. And as the population grew over the period of time, there was more carbon up in the air. Ultimately, this brought global warming, and we all know what are the impacts of global warming. The immediate ones and the visible ones, as looking at the today's context, we can see the forests are reducing. We know 70% of the grassland, 27% of tropical forest for agriculture we have lost, 50% of savanna we have lost, and 45% of the temperature deciduous forest we have lost over the period of time. We also know that the oceans are losing power to capture carbon because of the plastic maniac which we have created in the oceans. It is becoming difficult for the ocean to thrive. Nature and biodiversity and why it is important for us. We all know that biodiversity loss as a risk is becoming significant. 75% of the land and 66% of marine environments have been already altered, which also brought 25% of assessed plant and animal species threatened. 45% of ecosystems have declined compared to the estimated baseline. As it is very much visible to us, for the businesses also, biodiversity has a role, has a dependency and an impact. Businesses are dependent on nature. The fallout of business impacts on nature is visible. Impacts of nature loss on society is also visible. For businesses, the nature-related risks are the physical risks, regulatory risks, market risks, and reputational risks. And the governments are preparing to take action for the next decade. And the role of the governments, of course, will be about making sure that the regulations are more intense and it puts a pressure on the businesses as it grows. The consumer preferences are also shifting, and we know that how the single-use plastic policies have been altered and changed in many cities and nations. We also know that there's a growing demand for organic products, the products which are in synchronization with the nature and in harmony with the nature. Air pollution, extreme weather conditions, and the pandemic has shown us how nature loss impacts society and economy. And we, I mean, all the businesses, whether they accept it or they like it or not, but everybody was brought to knees when the pandemic had hit. We all must understand what corporation can do. Corporations for India, in India, like the one I represent, we had a clear direction from the Indian Business Biodiversity Initiative, which has been put together by the CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry, and the Government of India. And it was very simple for us to start looking at some form of a checklist which will help us really map our biodiversity, enhance awareness, set objectives, targets, and also assess risks and opportunities which are visible for us. This has been helpful over the years. We at Mahindra, we were one of the founding members of IBBI back in 2016. When we were doing this, we also constituted a sustainability framework within Mahindra, and we made sure that biodiversity and climate change risks is one of the strong pillars when we are talking about protecting our environment and making sure that we build enduring businesses by rejuvenating the environment and enabling stakeholders to rise. Our approach has been very simple. Initially, it was all about learning, so learning from the experts. These are the few names who have helped us on our journey. Then we, of course, as we started to learn about it, we wanted to create an impact. So we did an assessment of our sites and locations. And we do have sites which are in remote locations of the country. And it was but obvious to do a biodiversity assessment and understand our impacts and dependencies on the nature. And in the end, when you do that, it's all about rejuvenating and enjoying the environment which you are able to leave behind for the future generations. These are the few locations which we started to pick initially, since India had 4 biodiversity hotspots, and we had presence in the 2 biodiversity hotspots, which is the Western Ghats and the Himalayas. And when we were doing these assessments, we also started to realize the impacts and the benefits and the outcomes out of it. One such case story is the Club Mahindra Resort, which is a flagship resort of our hospitality business. And this is a resort which is situated in Western Ghats, part of the Karnataka region. Total 32.5 acres of the resort land. 74% of that is part of the dense cover and forest. And also it has area for coffee plantation. Now, since we kept it as it is, what happened, there were, over a period of time, we started recording 125 different varieties of plants, and more than 200 species of birds were documented. And we also made sure when we were making the construction, when we were doing the construction in the remaining 26% of the land which was used for roads and facility areas, we made sure that we create designs which are traditional and native to the local communities. Now, the impact of this work over the year was that there is a temperature difference between the town and the resort. And the resort is a little bit outside the town. And the temperature difference was 1.5 degrees Celsius anytime you go. And we were also able to avoid the installation of air conditioners. This brought us cost saving of $5.4 million, approximate of that number, as per the 2017 estimates. And for any business, I think that's a huge number. And it's all about when you start appreciating the nature, you get rewards. Similar example we saw in our engine manufacturing plant, where we were able to create the, the biodiversity near the location, which was 40 acres of land, and out of that 25 hectares of land was green cover. And when we were doing the plantation, we made sure that we plant only the local and native species. And this also brought an ambient temperature reduction of 2 degrees Celsius from the nearby town. And over the period of time, this brought dust reduction by 75%. Now, we all know that for an engine manufacturing plant, dust can act as an enemy. And so the result of our plantation was that we were able to reduce that cost, which we would have spent to reduce dust, right? And we were also able to reduce our water consumption. So 60% of water requirement was reduced. Our dependency was on the dams, and we were able to reduce 76% because the groundwater recharge happened because of the greenery we planted. And this again brought financial savings in the water bills. So what we are trying to do is, as an organization, our approach is to understand our impacts and then see what we can do. And in our recent collaboration with the Business for Nature, which is set up by World Economic Forum, we constituted and this statement is now endorsed by more than 500 companies, which represent trillions of dollars of market capitalization. And the statement which we have come out is that nature is everyone's business. Healthy societies, resilient economies, and thriving businesses rely on nature. Governments must adopt policies now to reverse nature laws in this decade. Together, let's protect, restore, and sustainably use our natural resources. And this is the statement which we have come out with as part of Business for Nature Coalition. And we invite all the other businesses and stakeholders to join hands with us. Thank you.
My name is Ramnathan. I am working for Sabah Suput Berhad and agroforest plantations. Okay. I'll be touching on human-elephant coexistence. Some of the problems or issue we've been encountering is, since 2004, we've been encountering conflict with elephants in the form of crops raiding. Okay. And that's the time the Sabah Suput Berhad, the plantation, is establishing or developing oil palm, okay, in a fast scale. Apart from that, yes, with the presence of elephants, we, the community of the workers, feel fear or threat whenever we see elephants. Yes, we all know that we are not an expert, but when you see a big size animals, certainly will feel fear what to do. Okay. And another issue that since 2004, we are doing some like trial runs. We do not have the appropriate mitigation measures, which is the right. There's no right measures, but some mitigation adapting to our plantation area. Okay. Some idea or initiative for the solution, how we come about. It's very important that there must be a top commitment from the management. That's the main thing. If the management can able to understand the pros and cons and setting aside land for wildlife, that kind of thoughts is very important from the top management, casting down to manager levels. Okay, in order to to address human-elephant conflict into a paradigm shift to human-elephant coexistence. Okay, but to convince the management, yes, we need a good working relationship. At this point of time, working with WWF Malaysia since way back in 1981, they've been doing some assessment on wildlife, especially in our tree plantation. Okay, with their supporting information, with their experts on wildlife, it gave us a convincing message for us to that it is possible for human-elephant coexistence. Apart from that, we do have a good consultation with government agencies like Sabah Wildlife Department, addressing the wildlife, and forest departments policies. There's a lot of challenges when addressing in order to come up with a human-elephant coexistence. One, establishment of wildlife corridor at an appropriate site. Okay, Sabah Zoo is a 60,000 hectare of land bank area. It's a big area. To put a wildlife corridor at the right area, it's not easy. That's where the experts from WWF Malaysia has convincingly shown us why the corridor need to be put in the northeast of Brumas region, basically to connect the two forest reserves. Other challenges, besides the site, we got to know that the length of the corridors and the width, so that it's a win-win solution, a win-win situation for the plantation in order to plant our plantation trees, and also rooms for movement for the wildlife, especially the elephants. And besides elephant, now we do see other wildlife are coming in, like sunbear, clouded leopard, orangutan. So with this kind of wildlife, one of the challenges is the choice of species. What kind of species are suitable for elephants, type of species for orangutan, and so forth. And that species also must be able to adapt to the terrain along the corridor side. And in order to plant the suitable species for the wildlife, other challenge is the planting materials. Because throughout the year, you don't get planting material in terms of seeds or wildings from our own wildlife forests. Okay, we have to outsource from outside. There are not much of nurseries that are able to facilitate in a large volume of planting materials. Weather. Whenever there's rain, it's a tendency that we're able to plant as much area as possible. However, down the line 2 or 3 days after that, there happen to be some dry weather, and this affects our planted trees in terms of mortality, scorching, and so forth. Apart from that, yes, the corridor is meant for wildlife. So when we plant trees, seedlings, they tend to have some trembling when you have herds of elephants, or even some wildlife are browsing the tip of the planted trees. And these planted trees, those are less than 3 years old, have been badly affected. And that shows the high mortality. Okay. And with the continuous rain in some part of the month of the year, which vegetation becomes very aggressive. And we are not allowed to use zero chemical wells to protect the wildlife, and also to have a conservation and thoughts on that. So we have to do intensive weeds management. Every month we have to go in. But to cover the whole area of wildlife corridor is quite difficult. A lot of challenges. Sometimes even work is difficult to do works, because whenever there's rain, they can't work also. And then now we are thinking about other challenges like what's next? Yes, we have re-established a corridor. We are planting progressively. There's a choice of species. What other initiative to be, to look into it, to attract the wildlife so that there'll be less disturbance in the plantation areas. Okay, so we have already started with the man-made pond, man-made salt lake. It's effective, but we are talking about beyond that. So this way we need some challenges and we need experts on this to guide us, to share with us, okay, so that we can further improve our human-elephant coexistence. Okay, the other challenges, this is a bit difficult part. Okay, this way we need the driver, the authority, the government agencies and experts like WWF Malaysia to encourage other plantations, to set aside a piece of an area or to link the corridor. So there's a continuity of movement of elephants, So we as a planters, it's difficult for us to talk to the other planters. So we need a driver to spearhead, okay? Maybe through the human elephant workshops, which we are having it in Tao regions. And it's very promising. Some of the benefits that we can see with these wildlife corridors. Yes, we are pumping in money to develop a 1,000 hectares plus 1,067 hectares over a 10-year period. It costs about 5 million, okay, to plant the whole area. And then we have to do maintenance. Every year comes about, from planting maintenance comes up 1,427 ringgit per hectare. So to see some returns, what we can see that with these corridors growing well, though we have some ups and downs, but we can see promote conservation tourism. We can see people through website or reading through news that some also have a established corridor, and we also have 50 to 60 elephants throughout the year. Okay, I think the presence of elephant, because the terrain that we have, the crops are diversified, oil palm and trees, and the corridor which links the two forests of Luk Lompang and Mount Wisa or Ulusagama. So there are nature lovers coming over to see the wildlife, especially the elephants. Why? They can see in 1 hour time they can see elephants already in our plantation and then also in the corridors. Okay, and with the presence of the tourists coming in, it also motivate our plantation workers. They feel proud to see that I call third parties, like tourists coming in, seeing them, looking at our plantation works, the activities, the elephants. So they feel, motivated. They feel happy, and it's also added value. And with this having this corridor, we also have positive sentiment. We can also attract donors. For now, we have the Unilever, very good enough to donate to WWF Malaysia about 1.24 millions. That's a very good initiative, and also showing that Sabah Surat, a plantation, able to establish a human-elephant coexistence. Okay, and this also added value to our markets. Whenever there are buyers to buy our products, oil palm or trees, one of the point of the race is, do you have wildlife, elephants? Do you care for them? So this kind of question or inquiries, we can show to them Okay, that you can show that human elephants are coexisting, and we also been certified for FSC for tree plantation and MSP for oil palm. So all these are giving added value to production. But last but not least, and also carry a good image of Sabah Sumut to go further. Further means attract more buyers coming and to buy our products because we are sustainable. We are caring for the 3 Ps. So with that, thank you.
Hello, my name is Lee. I'm from ERE Consulting Group. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share at this event. Allow me to share my screen and start my presentation. All right, my topic today is nature-based solutions in infrastructure development, and focusing on the wildlife crossings in the ECRL project, or East Coast Rail Link project, and specifically on Section A from Kota Baru to Dungun. Now, as we know, the ECRL project started in 2017. It was put on hold for a while and then resumed last year. So on the left is the original alignment in 2017, and on the right is the new alignment from 2019. Of course, from Mencakap to Port Klang is still under review, and we think it will be subject to change, as the Minister of Finance has informed us. But for today, I would like to just focus on Section A, which is Kota Baru to Dungun. The blue line was the previous or the old alignment, and the red line, as you can see here, is the new alignment, which is further inland. There are 6 stations along the way, and I would say I'm pleased to inform you that the Section A in Kelantan and Terengganu the alignment does not cross or does not cut across any permanent reserve forests or forest reserves. However, it does go through some forests which is on state land, which we call the state land forests in Terengganu, especially at 3 places in Terengganu, at Hulu Setiu, Merchang Terendak, and Hutan Payapak Saban. Now, zooming into this area, which I would like to focus on today, in Setiu. As you can see, the alignment goes close to forest reserves, but it does not actually cut through the forest reserves. So we have a commitment from the project proponent that they want to avoid the forest reserves as far as possible. And in this case, in northern Terengganu, they have actually managed to avoid the forest reserves. However, at this point here, the alignment still goes through forest, which is on state land. And as you can see here in the pink line, this is actually the Central Forest Spines and Secondary Link 5 to connect Hulu Setiu and the forest reserves inland with the Setiu wetlands on the coast. Now, zooming into this area, in the black box, you can see the Hulu Setiu PRF, forest reserve boundary, and outside it, there is still some forest. The red line is the ECRL railway, red indicating embankment, and yellow indicating bridge or viaduct. So this is what we worked on in the EIA last year, and the CFS Central Link, Secondary Link 5 is basically from east to west at this point. Here's the aerial view of the forest at this location. It's still intact. And as part of the EIA study, we conducted ecological surveys, wildlife surveys, using camera traps as well as groundwork, fieldwork, and observations. The red dots here represent the locations of 6 camera traps in this Hulu Setiu forest area, which were left for about 3 months. And on the right here are pictures of the camera traps placed in the forest. Back to this view, we have the 6 camera traps here. As you can see, they are spread out throughout the landscape, and to capture a representative sample of wildlife presence and distribution in this area. Now, these are the photos that the camera traps, the cameras captured. And then we can see there are tapirs, which are endangered, crested fireback, pheasant, sun bear, vulnerable species, pigtail macaque, leopard cat, and barking deer. These are the more unique, interesting species. Of course, there's quite an abundance of wild boars in the area too, especially for tapirs. This is one of the key species that we need to pay attention to. Now, these are, as part of EI, of course, we identified the potential impacts of the project on the wildlife and ecology. So during construction, of course, the main impact, habitat loss and habitat fragmentation, and also leading to human-wildlife conflicts, poaching, and road kill. These are results of the construction activities. However, leading on to the operation stage, which is over the longer term, habitat fragmentation is the biggest problem, and it persists throughout the operational phase of the project. It causes the barrier effect, where it blocks movement, inhibits free movement of wildlife, and as a result, wildlife will be forced to move or encroach into the railway itself, leading to collisions and between the trains and wildlife. And of course, human-wildlife conflict and roadkill could continue to be an issue. And in addition, encroachment and poaching, noise disturbance, and wildlife issues at stations. Now, as a result of these impacts, we propose to have wildlife crossings as one of the key mitigation measures. Of course, wildlife crossings can take a form of overpasses, viaducts, or underpasses. In the case of this ECRL, we've determined that overpasses are not practical, not viable. However, viaducts and underpasses are proposed throughout the alignment to enable wildlife crossings. Now, underpasses could be specific for wildlife crossings, or it could also be modified culverts, whereby the main function is drainage, but we propose to have a secondary function, an additional dry ledge where wildlife can move through the culvert. And we have proposed in the EIA 12 underpasses at 4 locations. As you just seen the map earlier, there were forests at Ulusat in the north of Terengganu, at Hulu Setiu, Ulusat within Kelantan, Hulu Setiu in the Setiu district, Merchang Cendak further south, and at Hutan Payas, Pak Saban, which is just north of Dungun. And the table indicates the proposed location. Of course, these would be subject to confirmation at the detailed design stage. And so back to the area at Hulu Setiu, the 4 squares here indicate the locations where we propose to have the wildlife crossings at roughly 1 kilometer intervals to enable continuity between both sides of the railway embankment. At that point in time, we were informed that the ECRL railway would be on an embankment at this location, as indicated by the red line. And so, in terms of engineering, wildlife crossings would take the form of box culverts, either 3x3 for smaller animals, or roughly 5 by 5 for bigger animals. And so based on findings on the camera traps, we identified the locations where we expect small animals in some areas and bigger animals in some other areas. So the sizing based on the animals that we expect. However, it is actually a pleasant surprise to note that during the detailed design stage, we were actually asked the questions by the engineers. Can we use a bridge instead of a box culvert for the wildlife crossing? This is because, as I mentioned earlier, the original design was to have an embankment at grade for the alignment. However, later on, after the detailed survey and design, it was decided that instead of having it at grade, the alignment would be on a bridge or viaduct instead. So this could actually be better than having a box culvert for wildlife crossing, because we could actually have like almost a 300-meter long bridge where wildlife could cross at any point within that 300 meters. So as you can see, replacing an at-grade embankment with a bridge has actually been a good thing for the wildlife. And in our opinion, yes, having the bridge can definitely be a better substitute than just a single box culvert at one location. So back to the topic of nature-based solutions as defined by IUCN. Nature-based solutions are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. Now, this is a list of the features of nature-based solutions, also from the IUCN. And as we can see, from what I have described earlier, we think that in this project, we have actually touched on all the 8 aspects of nature-based solutions. Firstly, we focused on nature conservation, as the EIA has focused on. We use technological and engineering solutions. We base our decisions or our findings on scientific knowledge through our surveys and camera traps. We adopt broad participation from the project proponent, the design team, from the authorities, local authorities, and even the local communities, which are engaged through the social impact assessment. And we strive to maintain biological and cultural diversity and the ability of ecosystems to evolve over time and to adapt, whereby allowing the wildlife crossings or enabling wildlife to maintain the connectivity sustains the ability of the ecosystems. And these solutions are applied at the landscape scale. As we note, our survey and our study is not just focused on that narrow corridor, but we take a broader view to a landscape scale, such as we recognize the CFS linkages from inland to the coast. And of course, we do also recognize that there are trade-offs. We can't have the best of every world. So between balancing economic benefits in the immediate future as well as future options. And finally, nature-based solutions are an integral part. So we have integrated the requirements to conserve, to protect, to manage nature or the ecosystem as part of the project, the design, from pre-construction, construction, as well as operation stage. And in terms of the category of nature-based solution approaches, I think that we have managed to fall into these two categories, which are the ecosystem-based mitigation and green infrastructure for this ECRL project. And finally, maybe some good news. I would like to note that in general, progress has been made in infrastructure projects with regards to nature conservation and ecosystems management. Firstly, wildlife and ecological and wildlife issues are becoming more prominent in infrastructure projects, especially the linear projects which pass through large landscapes. And there's more awareness now, definitely, of the importance of ecology and wildlife, both from the project proponents as well as from the design team, from the engineers, even up to authorities and communities. And there is increasingly clearer and more defined legal requirements. For example, wildlife impact assessments may soon become a requirement. Project proponents, engineers, and designers often now seek advice on ecological and wildlife issues. They will proactively ask us instead of being forced to consider such issues. And finally, we see that engineers and designers incorporate ecological and wildlife considerations into the project design. And they do come back to us with drawings and ask us to comment on it. So that is welcome and encouraging progress in infrastructure projects. So thank you. I won't take much of your time anymore. And back to the organizers.
And we will now start with the live telecast of this session. And so now we can move on to questions and answers. I don't know whether the participants have had a chance to actually pose some questions. Let me have a look. Okay, we do have some questions here. So let me maybe start off by asking these questions, and I would encourage all the participants here to please feel free to pose questions. If you could identify who you would like the question to be answered by, that would be great. And thank you so much for joining us. I believe we had about close to 300 participants signing up for this event today. So let me start with the first question that I see on the board here. It's from Victor Wong, and he asks, I believe, to Nisha, how individuals can participate in your green initiatives. Nisha, over to you.
Hi, can you hear me? Is it clear?
Yep, it's fine.
Okay. At the moment, there's a bunch of community projects that are going on. There is Kebun Bangsa, there is the TTDI Edible Garden. There's a whole bunch of community gardens that are happening all over the country, very focused in the urban setting. I am very happy to connect you. I would say drop us a message on Ecocentric Transitions on Facebook, and then we'll connect you to the other communities. But most of the gardening stuff is very basic, and you learn as you go. So in terms of volunteering or just picking it up, there's a lot of small groups that you can find just on community sets. Like in TTDI, there will be a community Facebook group. On Bangsa, there's something like that. Shah Alam has a lot of community gardens. So it really depends on where you're staying. And if you want to collaborate with us or come and join our sessions, yeah, drop us a line on Facebook. That will be the easiest. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Nisha. We've been prompted to speak a bit louder. Apparently, the sound is not carrying so well. Yeah, I think you have suggested that people find out more from your Facebook page, right, Nisha?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let me take the next question. this is to Hitesh. Hitesh, did you know beforehand that the planted trees will reduce dust in your factory? If so, how did you know about this? And if not, how was it discovered? Meaning, how did you link it to the planted trees?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Lavanya.
Thank you.
I hope I'm loud and clear.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe it's dragging a little bit, but please carry on. Oh, Hitesh, we can't hear you now.
Okay. Well, I think people generally don't know really about the impact of it. When we
Hitesh,
okay, I'll
we
try
can't hear
again.
you. Geez, thanks.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm saying that any activity when started has a very little known impact, which is probably documented or which is assessed. So this happened in our case also when we started planting trees nearby the factory. It was all done with the good intentions that yes, we need this entire place to have full of green environment, have birds chirping around, etc., etc. And of course, in India, there is a proper. I mean, we all know that there's a value system and cultural ethos behind planting trees. People plant trees and their wedding ceremonies. People plant trees when a child is born, etc., etc. So even if today you and I would activity the plant would love us to do is go and plant a tree, and so that's what happened for us also when we were doing this. We didn't really know, but eventually when we started looking at the impacts, we said that we are moving in the right direction and we need to plant more number of trees because it is showing results that the dust levels are also going down. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks so much, Hitesh. Thank you. Let me take the next question. I don't know whether you can see the question posted. No, I can't see it anymore. Can you all see it? Oh dear. Okay, let me ask this question. Are eco viaducts efficient enough to encourage wildlife crossings? This is, I think, to Mr. Lee. Did the EIA study include approximate abundance of wildlife loss when deforestation happens to open up railway construction? And there are, yeah.
Okay, the study we did was for the EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. So unfortunately, we do not have the time nor budget to do more detailed study as what the person is asking. We've done what is enough or sufficient for the regulatory review and approval. So I think more detailed studies can come later on. And in fact, the project proponent has some sort of a collaboration with Perhilitan, the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, to do ongoing monitoring, even enforcement, and also community outreach, awareness and training for the communities along the alignment as well as for the construction workers, so that I know they don't poach or they know how to respond when there's human wildlife conflicts, and also in cases where due to inevitably some animals may be driven towards housing or settlement areas, villages during construction. So the villagers also need to know how to respond when there are such incidents. But there has been, I think, research and studies of viaducts, wildlife crossings from other projects, and some have been shown to be effective Of course, some are not, and I think that there are many factors and issues. I'm not able to go through all right now, but sometimes certain viaducts or crossings which are designed are not used by the wildlife in the end, but maybe some others which might be unintentional. You know, it could be a bridge which is not actually designed for wildlife crossing, or some which are not expected may actually be more effective. But there are measures that can be done to improve the attractiveness of these crossings, to attract the wildlife to use them rather than to cross the road or the railway at other places, you know, to discourage the so-called jaywalking and to encourage the wildlife to use the crossings. Of course, different species also would respond differently to the different types of crossings. If bigger animals would not want to go through small culverts or through dark crossings, and I think in general, the bigger it is, the better. But sometimes if it's too big, then it's too open. There's might not be enough vegetation, and so some species might be averse to being in the open. So I think there are a lot of factors here, and I think what has turned out, something a blessing in disguise in the end for this is the design which I presented on just now, is that the design that is currently being proposed is not to have an embankment, but to have the entire railway on a 300-meter long viaduct, which means that the wildlife crossing is effectively like 300 meters long and about 5 or 6 meters high. So that should be sufficient for wildlife crossings and to maintain a continuity, which in the end is better than having small boxes along the alignment. So I think it's a back and forth process where the designers and engineers, even the project proponent, because cost is always an issue. So, to put in wildlife crossings is an extra cost. So I think it's an improvement that we see over time, that wildlife issues, ecology, and maintaining the landscape is given more and more priority nowadays. Of course, we would like it to be even more, but I think we are making some good progress here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you. Next question, I think, is to Nisha. Nisha, the question is, what are the major challenges in the edible garden project with school pupils?
Many. Because when we started
Give us
off 3 years ago,
three main ones,
yeah.
please.
Yeah, because if we just go to one school in one state, then it's not cost effective. So usually what we do is we do a group of schools in a district, and we work with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Agriculture. So at the point of which we exit, we've already baked into our program sustainability from the entry point of the Ministry of Agriculture at the district level to support the schools. So for continuous learning, because students and teachers, students more transient than teachers, because as soon as they finish standard 5 and 6, they're out of the school. But that's the best age for us to start our program, because it's in line with the Ministry of Education's Reka Bentuk Technology program. So our program is in line with the syllabus. And on top of that, we include the district agriculture department. So once the students in that year have progressed, the next year coming in can adopt the garden and proceed to the next level of growing. And if the teacher then leaves, then we need to ensure that there's transmission from teacher to teacher, because this is a whole community kind of engagement. It can't just sit with one teacher. It cannot sit with one child. So that's usually our challenge at the school level. And then going up the governance structure is making sure that the headmasters are involved, the district education board is involved, the district agriculture board is involved, because then there is a longevity even after we have left, because our life cycle is really short, and we really are dependent on working with corporate companies to ensure that we can be on the ground. We don't do a fundraising for these programs. We run them as projects. And for the particular ones that you saw, it was with a bank, and the bank had multiple branches within those districts. So that kind of decides the selection of which schools we end up going to. So our criteria is they are schools that have young people who are either of different learning needs. So some of them are special needs students, and some of them are non-academically inclined students. So they are already students who really enjoy physical learning and being outdoors. So we have these kind of criteria as well when we go in. So I guess you can see them all as challenges, or you can see them all as opportunities, and we see them as opportunities more than challenges, because then we can say, hey, you know what, the kid doesn't want to be in class, great, let's bring them outdoors, let's teach them maths in a very physical way. So then the maths teacher sees that it is very interesting that the students are learning through this physical space instead of just learning the theory in the classroom, which they are not connecting with. So it's all these kind of things that we find it could be a challenge, but then we sit down and we kind of like reverse engineer it and see how it works well for everyone, because it's a multi-stakeholder process. It's not just about the kids. The kids are the priority, but it's also about the buy-in from the teachers, from the parents, from the ministries and all that. So our job is mediating and executing on the ground. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, thank
I hope
you,
that
Nisha.
helps.
That's excellent. I think the experiential, yeah, absolutely. The experiential learning bit that you have emphasized is great to hear. You know, we are living in such a beautiful country with lots of, you know, nature. So it's important that we actually go out there and
Too
experience
much
it.
rainfall, too little rainfall.
Okay, we are actually running out of time. There are lots of interesting questions here, but there is this one maybe that's first I'll pose very quickly to Hitesh, and thereafter I'll pose a question to all the speakers, and then we'll have to wrap it up. So Hitesh, this question to you first from Mr. Muru of the British High Com. How is the EV market looking like for India, and what is the ambition in going forward? And how much of Mahindra's nature-based solution programs are designed as a pure carbon offset program driven for domestic and international market?
Sure. So I see two parts to this question. The first is about an inquiry about the electric vehicle ecosystem in India. And of course, this is not the platform for that, but I can quickly give one short answer. Electric vehicles are going to grow across the globe. And in India, it's not going to be a different story. There will be companies like Mahindra, there will be companies who are going to put a lot of technology and investments. And we all know that mobility, the future of mobility is going to be electric. If you need more information on that, please contact me. We can get you the right information. The second, on the nature-based solutions and how are we going to use it for carbon offsets if we are going to. Well, the answer is two ways. So first, our efforts and investments in nature-based solution is not to get carbon offsets out of it. If that happens, then of course we will not be, let's say, oblivious to the fact that yes, there is an advantage and let's take that advantage. Because we have set a goal for ourselves to become carbon neutral by 2040. So nature-based solution may help us to do that. But investing in nature-based solution is not just because we have a goal of carbon neutrality. Both of them are two different aspects. So we are putting efforts in biodiversity because of our presence, of our locations, which are critically impacting or dependent on nature, right? I mean, if I talk about our real estate business, if we do not take care of the environment near our resorts, the customers are not going to turn up. When people want to, let's say, go and spend time in the nature, they want that resort to give them that full access so that they can enjoy the nature as it is, right, without any human interference. The second is, yes, of course. So as I said, we are going to achieve our carbon neutrality goals. For that, we are going to use our carbon offset mechanism. But the trees planted inside the factories are totally different. That's only for that particular location. But whereas for our offset program, we have identified new sets of lands where we are going to do more plantation. And I can tell you this is in Vishakhapatnam. That's where coffee grows. So that's where we are going to put a lot of efforts to really secure our carbon offsets. So these two things are totally different.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Hitesh. And I think a lot of your efforts that you described earlier actually serve the other part of climate action, which is to build resilience as well. So kudos to Mahindra for taking this on, so well.
Thank you for the
Thank you for sharing. Let me now pose the final question. Actually, the question came in two parts, but I think the first part, which is what is the most prominent implementation of nature-based solutions from any of the speakers' perspective experience? I think all of you have given us wonderful and excellent descriptions, detailed as well as to what that is for your specific area or industry. So let me move on to the second part of that question, which is what would you advise other industries if they are looking into implementing nature-based solutions? Now, given that we have about 5 minutes left, may I invite each of you to maybe just offer one perspective about in answering this question. Can I start with Nisha, please?
I think for me, it's really about knowing what your core values are, what your business is, and really looking at what is the advantage with information that you already have. So my advantage when I did the school gardening project was that we knew that it's easier to work with young people than to work with older people. We knew that using an existing system where you have constant subscribers were important. So we needed the framework of a school to run our gardening program. We also knew that there was a need from the teachers because they didn't know how to do agriculture type content, given it was a primary component in the syllabus for that subject, Reka Betul Technology. So basically, we are solving other people's problems using what ability and knowledge we had. So we found that matching worked well for us. So
Thank you.
that's something I encourage people to do. Yeah.
Thank you. And Ms. Lee, if I can pass the floor to you to answer that.
Maybe just a suggestion. Well, for corporates, especially in infrastructure and construction, I think it's important for them to, or for us to change our mindset to move towards nature-based solutions voluntarily and as early as possible, starting now, instead of waiting for the law or legislation to catch up with us and force us to do it. I think it's just a matter of time before wildlife impact assessment becomes compulsory, and so that's another level, another layer of approvals. And so if people could get into that mindset now rather than being forced to do it later on, I think that would help. And also in the way projects are designed and the whole approach and the attitude towards nature, I think that needs to be changed.
Mr. Lee, if I can just ask a quick follow-on question, what are the cost implications? I mean, I guess if we look at costs differently, would it make a difference in terms of taking account of
yes, of course. Let's say you encounter a forest area. Of course, the best option is to tunnel, to go under it, but that's the most expensive. But from what we can see in this project, there are a number of tunnels. Actually, there are a significant number of tunnels, and these are, you could say, maybe not necessarily designed because of conservation or for wildlife issues, but purely because they want to go straight and level as possible. So they prefer to punch through a hill rather than cut it. But I think if we take this further in the future, it would be, people could see that it's actually advantageous to maybe spend more now to, let's say, to do a tunnel or to elevate your railway or your road rather than cutting and filling the earth. I think
Okay.
maybe
The
the
long-term
opportunity costs or the external costs need to be factored in.
Thank you.
Now. Yeah.
Thank you. That's excellent. And finally, Hitesh, let me pass the floor to you to answer this question. I mean, you've got past experience being big conglomerate. What would you advise?
Sure, I think Lavanya, many of us have seen the directions already set in the world, whether I talk about 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, or whether I talk about the Paris Agreement, or now, of course, post 2020 biodiversity framework is under preparation. And so the direction is clearly set. I think it's now to the businesses, to the civil societies, to the cities, to the administrations to start taking up actions, and even to the individuals. And we all have to, I know we all can't really do everything, but we need to clearly demark our area and say that, okay, this is the problem I have, and this is the solution I will bring to the table. And as businesses, it's clearly, we have understood in Mahindra's that if we are able to talk about the financial language and the financial benefits of investing in nature-based solutions, then you have people who take you seriously, right? So I think businesses can follow that method, while others, of course, have to define their own criteria and how they can make sure that their internal stakeholders listen to them. So everybody has to create a convincing case for their own stakeholders. But I think in the end, it's all about that nature is everyone's business, right? I mean, we can't live in isolation. We have seen it in COVID. If we are not going to take care of the nature is going to hit us back. And then all the GDPs and all the numbers, what we are talking about, can go for a stack. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You make a really wonderful final parting point then, Hitesh. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And thank you very much to our really excellent panel of speakers, and also the speakers who were able to join us for this live Q&A. Thank you very much. I mean, you continue to share much more convincing perspectives with the participants here today. We really, truly appreciate you taking time to be with us and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience in working with nature. I'd also like to really thank iGEM, MGTC, and CASA for including this event as part of the MCCG Climate Action Platform, and to also all those who have been working really hard behind the scenes to make this happen. And I would also like to recognize the efforts of the team from WWF, Zara and Calvin particularly, and also our comms team led by Roxy. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you in the forthcoming events of MCCG's Climate Action Platform, and also WWF's follow-up event of this event tomorrow, and the event on NDCs from Wednesday to Friday at the same time, 4 to 6. So thanks very much, everybody, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye.